Give a warm welcome this morning for our presenter, Alan E. Robbins.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here this morning. It's been a little while since I've been able to give this presentation, so I'll have to get myself warmed up. Appreciate the introduction. Typically, we are referred to as a Doug, dumb old utility guy. So, but anyway, again, I've been with Electric System for 32 years this coming May. But when I was appointed the general manager and CEO in August of 16, I'd been there 25 years. So it wasn't like I didn't understand the operation and how things are supposed to work, how we respond to storms. You know, that I had a wealth of experience in doing that. But leading up to November, in October of that year, my mother passes away. So then 1 month later, I get up and I drive to work on Monday, the 28th, and it looks like it's snowing in Sevierville. And so, and we had been watching, you know, we'd been hearing the news reports about what was occurring in the park and had been watching it, but, you know, had never really seen. It was very warm, very windy that morning, and looked like it was snowing. And I had some friends that actually live over in Jefferson County that said when they got to work, they said it was snowing over there too, and it was all ash. So, beginning the Monday, we had been having some outages, but you know, typically the day was pretty normal. We actually sent our crews out to do their normal work, but when they got to the areas we were working in Gatlinburg, they basically were calling back in and said, we can't see, it's hard to breathe, and we really can't do our normal work, you know, just because it's so difficult. And we were like, okay, so we kind of worked around that a little bit, but and then started calling them in, but we really wasn't having any outages. But you can see as a synopsis here, over 18,000 acres was burned. We lost 2,402 customers that night. Okay, we had 56,368 customers, and in 8 hours we were down to 53,966. And so, and then obviously over 200 people were hurt, and tragically 14 folks lost their life. And total estimated loss was well over $1 billion. Yep, that'll work. So if you can remember back then, from July the 5th through October and November, we had very little rainfall. And National Weather Service and U.S. Drought Monitors had listed us in a very dry, drought-stricken area, exceptionally dry, as a matter of fact, in some of our areas through the Appalachian. Then on the 23rd, there was a small brush fire. Obviously, we know the story at the chimney tops. Ended up being arson. 2 young men were striking matches and doing something on Snapchat, playing a song called Burn Baby Burn, and throwing the matches into the woods and and caught it on fire. And then, so they had about 6 acres that was burning on Saturday. Sunday had grown to 35 acres. And then we had predicted winds of 60-mile-an-hour gusts, 30 to 40 sustained. What we ended up getting was 60 to 65-mile-an-hour sustained and 90-mile-an-hour gusts, which is Category 1 hurricane. Not on the radar. And as you know, like last night, although we didn't have much trouble, wind is not our friend. Trees and electric lines don't go very well together. So increasing winds overnight Sunday. Midday, the fire had moved within 1.5 miles of the Gatlinburg city limits. By 5 p.m., the fire had reached residential areas there around Minot Park. And then at 6 p.m., there's multiple fires reported, plus Cobley Knob and Wares Valley. We experienced scattered outages through Monday, but nothing major. Heavy smoke was making it obviously difficult to work, but most everything was restored by 4 p.m. This is our customer outage report. All right, so as you can see, starting at about noon that day, we had 0. I know it's a little bit difficult to see it. About 2 o'clock, we had 144 customers out. At 3:30, we had 1,012 customers out, which if you've got 56,000 customers, having 1,000 customers out is not great, but statistically, that's not bad. We get that on pretty quick. Well, in 15 minutes, we had it cut down to 427. At 4:30, we're at 123. That's when our business office closed. I went back to our operations. I said, hey, how we doing? All outages are assigned. We're doing great. I said, good, I'm gonna go for a run. So I ran, got back at 5 o'clock, and we were at 81 customers out. I thought, okay, I'm going home. So I went home. Got home, I'd been there about 15 minutes. Bob Trenholm from the gas company called me. He said, Alan, we need somebody in Gatlinburg. I said, okay. So I called our director of engineering operations. He had taken his daughter to Morristown. I said, Jeff, I said, they're requesting somebody from the electric system to be in Gatlinburg. He goes, they're there. They're on Reagan Drive at the fire station. I said, okay. I said, we probably ought to head back into the office. I said, because Bob's voice sounded concerning. He said, Alan, I just got on the interstate here in Morristown and I can see the fire from here, which is 34 miles away. I said, I'll meet you at the office. By the time we got to the office at 6 o'clock, we were at 5,000 customers out. Okay, now we're still responding to outages. We know there's a fire, but we're responding to outages just like we normally do. All right, so then by 6:45, we were at 10,000 customers out. We know we got a problem. It heightened somewhere around around 9:45, we were at 13,803 customers out, which is almost a third of the system was out. And the fire only impacted a very small area of our distribution system. We have 2,272 miles of distribution line that covers most of Sevier County except Seymour and all of Townsend and pieces of Jefferson County. Only 60 miles of that was impacted. So it was a small space. And the linemen were not necessarily reporting back in on what they were seeing initially. They were trying to get to the outages. So in the meantime, they're trying to evacuate. They're trying to get people out. So our linemen, as they were trying to evacuate people out, 321 lines had collapsed, had everything blocked. Okay? So our crews get there. Now remind you, the winds are sustained at 50, 60 miles an hour, 90 mile an hour gusts. That doesn't work well with a 55-foot bucket in the air. They will turn one over in a heartbeat. But they raised that bucket and cut those lines to get the people out. Nobody knew about that. So they risked their lives to get that done, clear it all, just so we could get people out through the evacuation process. And knowing that raising that bucket with those type of winds could get them killed. So had dozens of taps out, 9 p.m., multiple substation circuits where breakers was open. So we were in a bind. Then at 9:57, TVA's primary transmission line was lost that comes out of Pigeon Forge into North Gatlinburg. If you go out Dudley Creek, there's a substation there. That's the main hub in Gatlinburg. We lost that circuit, so everything in Gatlinburg was completely out. Everything. Any way to communicate, we lost it all because TVA had lost the circuit. Well, in doing that, in a short period of time, it will switch over to a secondary redundant feeder. It switched over, came back on. After that, we lost it at 10:20. So we had nothing, absolutely nothing. So cell towers, everything. Anyway, radio towers, all that, gone. Well, by 11 o'clock, TVA, just by chance, in Chattanooga at their operations center, tried it, that first main line, and it held. so we got it back on. So as you can imagine, they're there at the Emergency Operations Center trying to facilitate, get people out, and dispatch people out, but couldn't do it till we got power back on. Burned 8 miles into our service territory, and finally around 2 a.m. the wind subsided and it began to rain, because it would have burnt all the way to Sevierville. I mean, it was coming, and we knew it was coming. But so the gentleman that was on Reagan Drive, we called, and sorry, Rich, I unplugged you there, bud. So we called, and he said, yeah, I'm here at Reagan Drive. Well, the reason that they didn't have anybody from the electric system up there, they forgot to tell him. They, in their panic, moved to the 321 at the main fire station. Didn't tell him, so he's sitting on Reagan Drive just below Monty Park. So he goes out and gets in the truck, opens the door, and cannot shut it. Now Mike, who just retired, is a big guy, strong guy. He could not shut the door. So he had to turn the truck into the wind so the door would shut. So he gets over to the EOC, and through that night, he said he could hear through the radio the firemen calling in, tell their wives or their family that they love them because they didn't think they was going to make it. That's how intense it was. Well, the other piece of this is our guys was in that, and they wasn't telling nobody nothing. They were responding to the outages. Well, as we learned, what ended up happening is they stopped responding to the outages at some point. They made a collective decision, each foreman, and they started rescuing people. Told nobody. They drove up Wiley Oakley Drive with their bucket trucks and their foreman trucks and their pickups. People in waves were running at them. They put them in their bucket trucks, in their foreman trucks, in the back of the pickups, and drove them down the spur to Pigeon Forge on the wrong side. Let them get off, turned around, and went back in to get more people. Told nobody. All right. One of the crews got up there, and they were one of the ones that found the 2 of the 14 that had lost their lives. So they did these things. Well, then, obviously, I go back to the outages. Well, the Gatlinburg water plant was out. That's Gatlinburg's main water intake facility. What had occurred, that particular plant is fed out of South Gatlinburg substation, which is on Reagan Drive. That substation was out because the 69 line that feeds that was down. Well, then, so we have redundancy. Well, it comes off Smoky Mountain. That substation was out. All of our fiber was burnt, destroyed, because we can switch power from one substation to another from the office. Well, we had no capable way of doing that because all our fiber was destroyed. Okay, so it had to be done manually. So the only way to do that is send these linemen into the teeth of this thing and let them go in there and actually switch that. Now, to do it manually, to do it from the office takes about a minute, maybe. Click of the mouse, move some things around, and you can switch power from one place to another. And you won't even see it. All right? But to do it manually, about 3 hours. So I sent these guys in there. I had to call them out from other places, and they had to battle to get there. They couldn't just go up the spur, up through the parkway, up through Gatlinburg, and get right to where they needed to be to do the switching. River Road, right there where one of the barbecue places are, and then they had to have a crew at the water plant. So we get them there, very limited cell service, no radio, and you have to go through a certain procedure to ensure you don't blow something up and that you don't get anybody hurt. and you've got a raging fire going on all around you. So Mike Crine and Bobby McCoy, they did everything they could. They ended up having to go up Upper Middle Creek, Burge Creek, come back down 321, cross over Dudley Creek, go all the way around to get to the Gatlinburg water plant. Then the other crew had to battle in across Campbell Lead, Glenstone Heights, and come in and get set up with their bucket truck, because they had to raise that bucket truck back up and get up on the pole to do the switching. And then the other was done in a large pull box area, which is underground. And what Mike Crine would do is he would drive into a little piece of the Sugar Lands where he could get a little bit of a cell service, and he would call into the office to Brent Ogle, and he'd get step instructions. And then he'd lose service. So he's writing it all down. He'd drive back down to the water plant, do all that work, go back to that spot, get cell service, and then go back, do what he could do for 3 hours with a raging fire around you. And then the guys were set up on River Road to do the switching at the pole, which, as you can imagine, I had to send those guys into an area that could have got them all killed. So that's weighed on me for years. The good thing for you all is it didn't hit me this morning emotionally. Because typically I lose it right here, but I'm good. So, because I think about their families and all the things. I know them personally, obviously. I know their families. So knowing what I had to do, I kind of got a feel. I talked to an Army commander one time, and I told him, I said, I'm not trying to identify with anybody in the military. I said, but I sort of get an idea of what it felt like to send somebody into battle, that knowing that they may not come back. He said, don't feel bad about that. He goes, because you felt exactly what we felt. All right, knowing that that could happen. But they did great. They did their job exceptionally well. All right. Then another crew gets up on Wiley Oakley. 4 cars been sitting there for 8 hours of fire burning all around them. They pull up on them and said, hey, would you all like to get out of here? And they said, put your car on the bumper of our truck. If you hit our truck, don't worry. Don't lose us, because if you lose us, anybody been on Wiley Oakley, well, think about it with raging fire and smoke. All right, you keep your vehicle on our bumper, and they led all 4 vehicles out of town. Told nobody. You know how I found out about that? One of the older gentlemen that was in one of the cars who was running out of oxygen wrote me a letter to tell me. The crew never said a word if they'd done that. And so that's what it looked like up some of these pictures. I mean, you all have seen a lot of the pictures, but that's what it looked like during the day. That was the next day. There you are, coming down it. Right here's the chairlift. You can see it. You can see where the chairlift goes. See that bare spot right there? And that's going down toward River Road. What the line crew said was they were on the north end of town, and they said they looked like embers the size of bricks or blocks were blowing across the parkway, like where Savage Gardens is, across Minot Park, all that, and was landing over on this side, Glenstone Heights. That's the crew, Bobby and Mike Crine. That's where they were coming down 321. That's a maintenance building there on 321 that was on fire. That was on their way to the Gatlinburg water plant. That's in Baskins Creek. Look at here. All these houses burnt in that one. A lot of the folks said that anybody that done the debris cleaning, kept their gutters clean, blowed all the debris out from around their house, that's typically what happened. And we saw in areas on Wiley Oakley where 25, 30 houses burned, and one in the middle that you thought would have been the exact one that went first survived. And it's because of maintenance, you know. This is looking up Baskins Creek. I was actually there on that Tuesday morning, and they found one of the deceased right in here. It's Westgate. So had several folks say, well, you just need to put everything underground. There were 70 spans of wire underground burnt. 70 spans. Of course, y'all know the story about this one. That's one of the wildest stories. Here was the couple from Alabama that was in the elevator, and they called 911. Couldn't, power went out, and they were stuck in the elevator. And so the fire department responded, went by building 4. Building 4 was gone. Went to building 5. It was still standing. Nobody there. So they're coming back out, and one of the firemen happened to look over and saw the elevator shaft. They go over and hit it with a crowbar, and the lady hollered out. So they was in an oven, as you can imagine. I told them they should be calling Otis and saying, hey, we'll be a rep for you, you know. So, but they survived, but if you can imagine the horror of being in that. The other story was one of the park rangers was coming out of the Sugarlands area where we were sending Mike Crine in to get his step instructions, and he said, I come out and it was a tunnel of fire. And he said, I got to the red light right there where Ski Mountain Road comes off. Here comes 2 cars on their rims. The fire burnt the tires off of it, and they said, how do we get out of here? And he said, that way. And there they go down Main Drag Gatlinburg on their rims. Roaring Fork. Actually, this one did pretty well. All that got burned on this one was the deck. Seen several of these. Of course, you know how that's the aluminum wheels on this car. Has to get 1,200 degrees. Our lineman said it looked like lava running down the street. This is all in Roaring Fork. One of the abandoned ones. It's going up Wiley Oakley. And here again, we saw a lot of this, and this is where the people were just abandoning their cars and was running to get out. And you think about it, I mean, we're local, but I was on Wiley Oakley like the 29th afternoon. And I went up there and got lost. You know why? Because all my markers was gone. All my visual, the things that I was used to seeing, I'd get turned around. I thought, where am I at? Well, then I thought, I don't want to tell that story, but then our linemen were doing the same thing. But this right here, you know, there's a lot of stories that went around, but this is where these guys went in from the military, and then there was another special group that came in that were actually looking for deceased. And there was all these wild stories that went around about, you know, that we had these mobile morgues and all these things out there. That's not true. I was in every one of those meetings, all right? So none of that's true, all right? There was 14 fatalities in this. And you look at, we evacuated 14,000 people, and 14 people passed away. Statistically, that's good. Unless you're one of the 14, then it's 100%. So, now, what do you think is unusual about this picture? There you go. So how high was the flame? That's a 50-foot pole. 50-foot pole. As you can imagine, when our guys pull up on this, you're just train wrecked mentally, knowing what you've got to rebuild. We had some unusual things happen. We had poles that would catch on fire here and burned the whole pole down into the butt, the part that's in the ground, and set the transformer. It just slowly burned down like this right here. Just set the transformer down. And we had some, and I think I've got a picture of it. Here again, you can see where it's on fire up top. That's steel structures. That right there, that's three-phase. When you pull up and see something like that, you basically want to start crying. But that's over at Westgate. You can see the pole still smoldering right here. See where that one caught on fire there? Yeah, exactly. So this one caught on fire here. Well, this one was easy to pick out. We had several that burnt off right there, and they just sat on the ground. And unless you were really looking, you couldn't tell. There you go. That one was a little easier. There you go. See where all your secondary is pulled off to go over to whatever service. This one laid the transformer on its side, but that pole burned all the way down and is completely gone, but all your other hardware is there. But we had one that was actually set the transformer right up. Now this is an underground transformer. See how all that burnt up? So, because once it got in those pull boxes and burnt, it would just burn out the circuits in the conduit. He made it. This was almost tragic. You know, they build these cabins on the side of the mountains, and so they had steel girders and poured this concrete out there. So we pull in. Actually, he was trying to turn around. He pulled in and it gave way. So that's about a 50-foot drop going right there. Well, the gentleman driving this truck's about 6'4", 320. And the guy that's back here that's trying to help him is 6'8", 350. And Marcus said, "Get ready, brother, you're gonna catch me." And he jumped out of that truck into his arms. So you can imagine how that went. But he was really close. There's going into Gatlinburg. So we had approximately 60 linemen, apprentices, operators, laborers that responded that night. We ended up getting help from LCUB, Lenore City Utility Board, KUB, Clinton, and let's see, there's one more. Cleveland sent a crew. And that's an agreement that we have amongst the utilities. We have a mutual aid agreement that if somebody's in trouble, we'll come help. And so we've done that. We've helped, and then they've sent us help multiple times. And of course, Service Electric sent us 17 line crews. So we had 6 of our own, 17 from Service Electric, and then those from Cleveland, Lenore City, Clinton, and KUB. And had many more that were offering assistance, but the problem was only 60 miles of our distribution line was impacted. Once you get that many crews in a small area, it becomes dangerous because you're kind of on top of one another. The communications has got to be on point, okay? So, plus we had 17 crews from Townsend, 3 from Wolf. And so initially, had 613 separate outages. Usually 100 outages takes 24 hours to get back on. Initially out of the gate, we replaced 436 poles. After that, we was 500 plus. So to put that in perspective, those that can remember the blizzard of '93, my first snowstorm ever, we replaced 148 poles. That storm was system-wide, all right? This was small area. We replaced over 1,000 poles in this small area. And somewhere in the neighborhood of about 450 transformers. We had 125,000 feet of overhead conductor, which is everything you see above, and then 15,000 feet of underground. We lost initially $4.5 million is what it cost us. Now, to be the brand new manager, being the good guy that I wanted to be, on October the 1, TVA had a rate increase. We absorbed it and didn't pass it on to our customers. I thought, well, you know, that's $2.2 million per year that's saving our customers. We're still doing that. We've never passed it on. So since 2016, we've been saving our customers $2.2 million per year because we absorbed that 1.5% rate increase. And we had another one in 19. So right now, 3%, we have saved our customers. If I'd have known this was going to happen, I don't know. All right? But anyway, we'd spend an additional $600,000 on repairs. Those 2,402 customers, and when I say customers, it's accounts, meters. It was conservatively, that's $2.8 million annually in revenue that vanished in 8 hours, okay? Now, we're a public power entity. So what that means is we exist to serve you. We're not an IOU. We don't pay investors. All right, we exist to serve you. And in doing so, you know, we got to manage everything appropriately. But when you lose these kind of dollars, you know, you got to be cognitive of what's going on. So the storm initially cost us about $5.9 million. And then 1 year later, we spent an additional $4 million on tree trimming. That are trees that are outside of our trim right away. We had to go because they were falling and still taking us out. We lost the 69 line that goes over to South Gatlinburg substation multiple times because of those trees on Dudley Creek. So it typically cost us about $5 to $6 million per year. So we added an additional $3 million to that. And, you know, growing up, my mother always taught me what the 4-letter F-bomb is. And not to ever say that. Well, in 2017, the new 4-letter F-bomb for us was FEMA, FEMA. All right? Because they declared only categories A and B, which is debris removal and emergency response. And we had spent about $75,000, $76,000 doing that. So they only reimbursed 70 to 75%. So they sent us a check for $57,109. And if legally I wouldn't went to the penitentiary, I would have donated that to help rebuild somebody's house. But you know how the federal government goes. They wouldn't like that. So all we got, that was for debris cleanup. And that's all we got. So millions of dollars obviously were injected back into the county, had help all around the country. Many burned houses have been rebuilt. Since 2016, we've added 6,700 customers, new customers. We are the 54th largest municipal in the country out of 2,200 and something. Nobody knows that. We're the 8th largest in the Tennessee Valley. So put that in perspective, Memphis is like number 3 in the country. Nashville's 5 or 6. So for here in Sevier County, nobody thinks about that. You know, we're 54th in the country. So I'd be happy to take any questions. One thing that I know you all have seen the book, I never envisioned writing a book. So I was having my very first ever presentation. I was in Chattanooga speaking to the co-ops. Now we're in a municipality. So I'm speaking to the co-op folks, and I get to the point where I had to and I've never talked about it before myself, I had to send these guys in to get the water plant back on and talked about the families, and I'd never talked about it in public before, and it hit me. and I'm in front of about 250 co-op Dougs, all right? And I gripped that podium and started shaking, and I thought, what is happening to me? So I stepped away, you know, got back out of it, came back in, apologized for getting emotional. Please forgive me. Finished the presentation. And afterwards, I'm in the lobby of the Chattanooga. Guy comes up, pecks me on the shoulder, said, man, Mr. Robbins, that was an unbelievable story. He goes, you need to write a book. I said, you're nuts. I said, I can talk to one, I can talk to 100, I can talk to 500 people. I said, writing a book, never going to happen. He said, no, just take this material, we'll help you do it. I said, okay. So I took it, drove back to Sevierville, got to my office, file 13 sits right here. Started to throw it in file 13, but it didn't. I put it in my middle drawer, my junk drawer. So that's one step away from file 13. And so anyway, over the next month, different people were calling, checking on me. You know, I'd tell them a little bit, and they said, man, you ought to write a book. So the fifth person that called was one of my board members, Robbie Fox. He's just checking on me. I tell him this story. He said, put it on the board agenda. I'm going to make the motion. You're going to write the book. Oh, yeah. Oh, now I've got orders. I don't have a choice. So anyway, so I start the process. And I'm not a writer. I mean, I can get up and have a conversation, talk to people. That's the world I like to live in. Writing, nah. And so anyway, I started this process. And they said, you know, you need to tell your story. I said, but really it ain't my story. It's part of my story. But it really needs about our linemen. Because they were in the teeth of this thing. I was only in the background directing. But it needed to be about our linemen. So I tell a little bit about me and about the area, you know, my connection to the mountains. I've got as much family buried in the park as I do in the surrounding cemeteries. I've got so much family buried in the park, I can be legally buried in the park. So anyway, I'm like, okay, so I'm doing this. And I said, so I go to the lineman. I said, hey, just write down one thing that you experienced that night. Just jot some notes. And I said, I'll write it. And then you prove it and say, yeah, that's the way it happened. And I said, I'll put it in the book. And I'd get, that went on for 4 or 5 months. Not one, not nothing. They wouldn't tell me nothing. So I'm going to the mirror doing some self-evaluation, like what have I done? I've made them mad, you know. They're not, I've ticked one of them off during this whole ordeal. So anyway, I'm trying to work through this, and I called a friend of mine in Knoxville who runs a big ad agency, and I tell her this story. She goes, I'll come up, and I'll interview them. Pick 16 of them, and I'll interview them, 45 minutes apiece, and I'll record them, I'll write it, and we'll get it in the book. I said, because they will not talk to me. So I picked 16 of them, and they all agreed. They said, okay, yeah, we'll set. I said, you don't have to write nothing. You just got to go in there and talk. I'm like, okay, we'll do that. So they go in and do that. After 6, each one of them went an hour and a half plus. She comes into my office. She is squalling. She goes, they've all got PTSD. Every one of them. She says, 4 of them broke down on me. I'm like, really? So we'd offered that help anonymously. We had, out of the gate, we'd offered help. We've got those in place to give. Whether they took advantage of it or not, I don't know. But for that whole period of time, there was a cloud over our system. You know, not a physical cloud, but just a cloud. You could just tell the mood wasn't there. And so what I learned from that is they felt defeated. They are the guys when the rubber meets the road, when the power goes out, everything stops. I mean, if you get a blink, it's like, damn, you know, right? Right? I mean, that's the world we live in, and we understand that. So we got to be on our game 99.9, right? And even in that little fraction, if we blink, it's, you know, it causes you problems. So they're the guys that like to go in and know that they fix things. They've got you back going. They got the power on. You're staying cool in the summer. You're staying warm in the winter. And they could not do that. And in their mind, in their psyche, they felt defeated. So they were struggling with that. And because they were there working, rebuilding, and they'd see these families come in and had lost everything. And people had brought our guys' crews food. They would come down and give their food away to these people and get in their pocket and give them money. They were doing those things. Told nobody. Told nobody. So anyway, so they get their stories in the book. It gets written, and the cloud is gone. It was therapeutic for them. So we needed pictures, and we're not very good at, you know, when you're in the teeth of things, the last thing you're thinking about is taking a picture, really. Now, we got some. Most of them are afterwards. Got a few, but most of it is, you know, post-fire. So I called a guy that used to live in Sevier County, Bruce McCamish. He came up and he took some pictures. And I got a hold of him. I said, hey, I'd like to purchase some of your pictures. And he said, what's your intent? I said, well, I'm doing a book project. He goes, we need to go to lunch. I said, okay. Go to lunch. He goes, how are you benefiting from this? I said, I'm not benefiting. Well, yeah, I am. I'm going to benefit one way. I said, monetarily, I'm not going to benefit anything. I said, if this book can make a nickel, I'm going to donate every bit of it to the restoration or to local charities that helped during the restoration. So I'm going to donate all the net proceeds to that. And I said, but the one way I'm going to benefit, I said, I'm going to call one of my professors in college and tell her she can now retire because her worst student has penned a book. And I did that. I emailed her. I told her just a little bit. I have written a book. She calls me immediately and says, I'm coming to Sevierville. I'm taking you out to lunch. Call Jake. I'm going to take Jake out to lunch too. I want 3 copies, one for me, one for the university, and one she sits on the board for Kentucky Utilities, which is an IOU. She goes, I'm going to give it to their CEO. So that's the only way I benefited. I get to say I wrote a book. I call myself an author really loosely, you know. But it wasn't enjoyable to get that done. But the biggest piece of that, I felt like that we accomplished, is it lifted the cloud off of our guys because they got to tell their stories. Because they did some amazing things. And the firemen were phenomenal that night. The police officers, the EMAs, all those EMTs, all those folks that did what they do, you should be proud of them. They did wonderful, all right? But the story that got lost and makes me feel proud when I was giving some of these $1,000 gifts to the fire departments, the chief of Gatlinburg said if it hadn't been for your guys, thousands of people would have died. Wow. And I was like, are you serious? And all of his firemen said if it hadn't been for the electric system, thousands of people would have died. So I thought, well, it makes me feel pretty good. And so I share that with those guys. I said, you all did a phenomenal job. And of course, they're the bravado. Yeah, well, you know, now we're good. We know we're good, you know. Yeah, and they are. And I brag on them. It's a privilege for me I'm their boss. But it's a privilege for me to get to work with those guys because they are superstars. They are really good. And so when the power's out, trust me, we are the last entity on the planet that wants your power out. All right? Because the meter's not turning, we're going backwards, okay? So some people say, well, you just leave us out. No, I promise you. You know, we want them all on all the time. So, but they are good, and I'm proud to be a part of it. So. And I'm an old Pigeon Forge guy too, so.
And Alan is not very good at plugging himself, but he does have his books for sale today. He takes cash or check. He is not set up for card.
Old school.
But he does have them available for sale, and he will be hanging around too if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask
Yep.
him one-on-one. So if we could hear it for Alan Robbins.
Thank you all.